Hi everyone, welcome back to Economics by Arsha, and in today's video I'm going to be talking about the 5 determinants of demand. For a quick recap, the 5 determinants of demand are income, prices of other goods, consumer tastes and preferences, seasonal changes, and an increase or decrease in population size. So today, as promised, I'll be talking about the price of other products. So for this determinant of demand, there are actually two parts. There's substitute goods and there's complementary goods. Let's start with the substitute goods. An example of substitute goods would be milk and apple juice, because the two could be substituted for each other based on their change in prices relative to each other. So when the price of a substitute good decreases, the demand for good X would decrease as well. What this means is that if the price of, let's say, apple juice were to decrease, then the demand for milk would decrease as well. Now, this might be a little confusing, but the reason for this is because when the price of apple juice decreases, consumers are likely to want to purchase apple juice simply because compared to the price of milk, apple juice is now cheaper. Therefore, it would be an incentive for the consumers to buy the product. So what this means is that the demand curve for milk would shift to the left because there's a decrease in the demand for milk. Now, when the price of the substitute good increases, then the demand for good X would increase as well. So, following the previous example, if the price of apple juice were to increase, then the demand for milk would increase as well. Because with the increase in the price of apple juice, it's clearly a put off to customers because compared to milk, apple juice would seem more expensive, so they would opt to buy milk instead. And what this means graphically is that the demand curve for milk would shift to the right. Now, let's talk about complementary goods. An example of complementary goods could be rollerblades and helmets, because the two goods would be bought as a pair. When you buy rollerblades, you're going to buy helmets just for safety reasons. Therefore, it's a complementary good to a rollerblade. So when the price of a complementary good decreases, then the demand for good X would increase. What this means is that, for example, if the price of rollerblades would decrease, then the demand for helmets would increase. This is because there are now going to be more and more consumers purchasing rollerblades due to the decrease in price. And what this means is that there will also be more consumers now purchasing helmets with the rollerblades. Therefore, the demand for helmets increased. So what this means is that the demand curve for helmets would shift to the right. But if the price of the complementary good increases, then the demand for good X would decrease. So following the previous example, if the price of rollerblades increased, then the demand for helmets would decrease, because there are now fewer consumers buying rollerblades. Therefore, there would be fewer consumers buying helmets. So the demand for helmets would decrease. So what this means for the demand curve of helmets is that it would shift to the left due to a decrease in the demand for helmets. Now, let's look at some example questions so that you can practice. Here the question is, explain the effect of an increase in the price of CD players on the market for CDs. So here I have a graph with a demand curve and the title, the market for CDs, and the y-axis represents the price of CDs, and the x-axis represents the quantity of CDs bought. So let us establish, what is the relationship between the CD players and the CDs? Well, we can assume that CD players would be a complementary good to CDs, because in order to be able to use the CDs, you need a CD player. And here it says that there would be an increase in the price of CD players. So if we remember what we learned, an increase in the price of a complementary good results in a decrease in the demand for good X. So an increase in the price of CD players would result in a decrease in the demand for CDs. So graphically, the demand curve for CDs would shift to the left. So let's show that. We have two demand curves, and we need to show the shift. So the shift would be from here to here. So the demand curve shifts to the left. There you have it. But if you have to write this, then you would write, if the price of CD players increased, then the demand for CDs is likely to decrease, resulting in a shift of the demand curve to the left, due to the CD player being a complementary good, ceteris paribus. Don't forget to mention this at the end of your sentence. It's very important because we're only talking about one factor being affecting the demand, so ceteris paribus implies that. Because of the increase in the price of CD players, consumers would have to pay more money, which would have an effect on the demand for CDs as well, as consumers are deterred by the increasing price of the complement good. Another thing to be aware of is labeling your demand curves. When there's a shift, you have to label the demand curve to ensure that the examiner knows that there are two different curves. So the original curve we would label as D, whereas the new curve, the shifted curve, we would label as D apostrophe or D star, up to you. Now the next question is, explain the effect of a decrease in the price of beef on the market for chicken. So looking at the two products, I'm sure you all guessed that these two are actually substitute goods. Chicken can be substituted for beef, and beef can be substituted for chicken, based on the changes in their prices. And the question says that there has been a decrease in the price of beef. So if you remember what we learned, a decrease in the price of a substitute good results in a decrease in the demand for good X. So a decrease in the price of beef would result in a decrease in demand for chicken. So here we're going to have to draw this on the graph. And a decrease in the demand for chicken results in a shift of the demand curve to the left. So we have to have two demand curves and then illustrate the shift to the left. And this would be done by the arrow. Drawing an arrow ensures that your examiner and you know that you've drawn a shift of the demand curve to the left or to the right. And we must label our demand curves. So this was the original demand curve, so we label it D. And the second demand curve, we would label D apostrophe. So if you had to do this in written form, you would say that if the price of beef decreased, the demand for chicken would decrease as well, illustrated by a shift of the demand curve to the left, ceteris paribus. This is because consumers are likely to substitute the cheaper beef product with the chicken due to the drop in prices for beef. Thus, the demand for chicken would decrease. So, this is all for today. Thank you so much for watching, and if you have any more questions, do leave a comment and I'll answer right away. And like and subscribe and turn on your notifications so you'll be notified when I upload my next video. Thank you for watching.